Ever been looked down on by someone you could buy and sell 10 times over? Robert Williams was, and he let it happen, on purpose. The garage under the Brooklyn apartment building smelled like motor oil and decades of concrete dust. Robert Williams crouched beside a black sedan at 5:30 in the morning, wrench in hand, elbow deep in an engine that had given him trouble twice in the past month. 39 years old, hair starting to gray at the temples, hands scarred from years of work that didn't show up on any resume anymore. The kind of man people stopped noticing the moment he stopped talking. He heard the footsteps before he saw her. Light, deliberate. The shuffle step of someone navigating stairs in socks. Emily appeared around the corner holding a chipped ceramic mug in both hands. 7 years old, amber eyes that caught light at strange angles, hair uncombed and falling across her face. She wore pajamas with astronauts on them and carried the coffee like it was a science experiment that might explode if she moved too fast. She set it on the workbench beside his toolbox. Steam curled up into the fluorescent light. Robert straightened, wiped his hands on a rag that had been white once, picked up the mug. "You're up early." Emily climbed onto an overturned milk crate, legs dangling, watched him drink. "School projects due Friday." He waited. She had a way of delivering information in pieces, making you work for the full picture. "We have to write about what our parents do." Robert set the mug down, picked up the wrench again, leaned back into the engine. "What are you going to write?" "I don't know yet." Her voice carried a question she wasn't asking directly. Emily never asked directly. She'd learned early that the world gave you more if you watched and waited than if you just demanded answers. "You could say I drive people to important places." "Is that what you do?" He adjusted a belt tensioner, felt it click into proper alignment. "That's what I do now." Emily's feet swung back and forth. She looked at the toolbox. Old logo stamped on the side, faded but still visible if you knew to look for it. Hailstorm Logistics. Block letters. Corporate blue that had weathered to something closer to gray. "What did you do before?" Robert didn't answer. Reached for a different wrench. Let the silence stretch until it became its own kind of response. Emily understood. She always understood. Slid off the crate, picked up her mug from the workbench even though it was his, not hers, carried it back toward the stairs. "I'm going to work on my math homework instead." "Finish the story problems first. Save the easy ones for last." She paused 3 steps up. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." She disappeared around the corner. Robert listened to her footsteps fade, then turned back to the engine, tightened the last bolt, closed the hood, stood there in the empty garage with grease still on his knuckles, and thought about a question his daughter hadn't quite asked. The truth was complicated. The truth was he'd built things once. Systems that moved freight across 6 states, algorithms that optimized routes for 10,000 shipments a day, infrastructure that made other people rich. He'd built it with a partner who'd believed in moving fast and a philosophy that said foundations mattered more than speed. They'd fought about it constantly. The company had been better for every one of those fights. Then his partner had died, and Robert had walked away. Not because he'd stopped caring, because his daughter had needed a father more than a corporation needed another executive. That had been 4 years ago. Emily had been 3. Didn't remember her mother except through photographs and stories Robert told on nights when the grief sat lighter than usual. Didn't remember the office on the 41st floor or the board meetings or the arguments about scaling too fast versus building to last. She remembered this. The garage, the toolbox, the way her father fixed things with his hands instead of hiring someone else to do it. Robert wiped down his tools, put them back in their places. The logo on the box caught overhead light for just a second. Hailstorm Logistics, the company he'd co-founded, the company that still sent him a paycheck every month, routed through enough legal structures that nobody on the operational side knew where the money actually went. The company that thought he owned 5% when the truth was 50. He'd let them think that, on purpose, because he'd wanted to see what would happen when nobody knew he was watching. So far, what had happened was a lot of expensive mistakes and a CEO who'd inherited her father's company without inheriting his patience. Robert picked up the coffee mug Emily had brought him, still warm, drained it, rinsed it in the utility sink, checked his watch. 6:45. He had a pickup at 8. Upstairs, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her math book open and a pencil moving across lined paper in quick, confident strokes. She didn't look up when he came in. Robert made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice in a glass that didn't match any of the others. Set her plate down beside the math book. Finish 2 more before you eat. She nodded, kept writing. He watched her work through a story problem about trains leaving stations at different speeds. Watched her check her answer twice before moving to the next one. Some part of her mother lived in that. The carefulness, the refusal to guess. 7:15. She closed the book. 8. He sat across from her with his own plate and the kind of quiet that only happened between 2 people who'd learned not to fill silence just because it was there. "What time do you pick me up today?" 3:15. "Can we go to the library after?" "If you finish your homework in the car." She made a face, tried to negotiate. He didn't move. She gave up, smiled into her orange juice like she'd expected to lose anyway. By 7:40 they were out the door. Robert drove her to school in the sedan he'd fixed that morning, pulled up to the curb where the crossing guard stood with her orange vest and her stop sign. Emily grabbed her backpack. "Love you." "Love you too. Don't forget your science folder." She checked. It was there. She gave him a look that said she'd already known, but appreciated that he'd reminded her anyway. Slid out of the car, joined the stream of kids moving toward the entrance. Robert waited until she disappeared inside. Then he pulled away from the curb and merged into morning traffic. His first pickup was at 8. Hailstorm Logistics Headquarters, Midtown, glass tower that reflected the sky so perfectly you could forget there was a building there at all. He arrived 7 minutes early, parked in the garage reserved for contract drivers, checked the manifest on his phone. Passenger, executive, destination, financial district, duration, estimated 40 minutes depending on traffic. No name. They never put names, just ranks, titles, categories of importance. Robert pulled the sedan up to the executive entrance at exactly 8 o'clock. Waited. Glass doors opened. A man in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent stepped out, phone already to his ear, eyes scanning for his ride. Robert got out, opened the rear door. The man slid in without acknowledging him, kept talking into his phone. "No, I told them the Q4 migration timeline was aggressive. They didn't want to hear it. Now they're surprised we're behind schedule." Pause. Listening. "I don't care what Jennifer says. She's not the one who has to make this work. She just wants it done fast so she can show the board she's decisive." Robert closed the door. Got behind the wheel, adjusted the rearview mirror, pulled out into traffic. The man kept talking. "The old partners? They're gone. Jennifer runs it now. That Williams guy was smart, I'll give him that, but he was too slow. Always wanted to double-check everything, build in redundancies, plan for problems that might never happen." Robert took a left onto 5th Avenue. Kept his eyes on the road. "Yeah, well, speed wins. Williams didn't get that. That's why he's not here anymore." Robert said nothing. Let the man talk. Let him assume the driver wasn't listening, wasn't important, wasn't anyone who mattered. People told you everything when they thought you were nobody. The ride took 38 minutes. Robert pulled up to the building in the financial district. The man got out mid-sentence, still on his phone, didn't look back. Door slammed. Gone. Robert sat there for 5 seconds. Then he pulled away and checked his phone for the next pickup. 3 more rides that morning. All executives. All from Hailstorm. All talking like he wasn't there. One woman complained about the new routing protocols. Said they were faster but kept generating errors nobody could track down. Said Jennifer had pushed them through over the tech team's objections because the board wanted proof she could execute. One man bragged about a contract he'd closed. $300 million over 5 years. said Jennifer had personally negotiated the terms, played hardball, didn't give an inch, said she was tougher than her father ever was. One younger guy, maybe 30, talked to someone about office politics, said the old guard was being pushed out. Anyone who'd worked with the founders was being sidelined. New people coming in, Jennifer's people. Loyal to her, not to the company's history. Robert drove them all, listened to all of it, said nothing. By noon he was done with hailstorm runs. Picked up Emily from school at 3:15. She came down the steps with her coat half-buttoned and her backpack listing to one side, carrying a folder full of worksheets she'd finished during lunch. Climbed into the back seat like she always did. Liked it better than the front. Said it felt like her office. "How was your day?" She buckled herself in, already pulling out homework. "Good. Marcus brought a lizard for show and tell. It escaped. Mrs. Patterson screamed. Did they find it?" "Yeah. It was under her desk." Robert pulled away from the curb, watched her in the rearview mirror. She was smiling at the memory, pencil already moving across a worksheet. "Did you finish your story problems?" "All of them." "The hard ones first?" "Like you said." He took the route home that avoided construction. Smooth, efficient, the kind of driving that didn't announce itself. Emily looked up from her homework. "Can we still go to the library?" "After dinner." She went back to her worksheet. They drove in comfortable silence. The city moved past the windows, ordinary and enormous, full of people who had no idea who anyone else really was. That evening, after Emily was asleep, Robert sat in the kitchen with a glass of water he hadn't touched and a phone that had been vibrating since 6 o'clock. He picked it up. Richard Davis, attorney, 62 years old, gray hair, three-piece suits, the kind of lawyer who'd seen enough corporate warfare to know when to fight and when to wait. Robert answered. "The board's been asking again." Richard's voice came through tired. He'd been managing this same conversation for months. "They want you formally back in the room. The new CEO's been making structural changes that worry them. System migrations, protocol updates, vendor contracts, all aggressive timelines." Robert leaned back in his chair, looked at the ceiling. "I know what she's been doing." "Then you understand why they're concerned." "I understand completely." Silence on the line. Richard waiting for a decision he already knew wasn't coming. "Tell them not yet." Richard had learned not to argue with not yet. He moved on. "There's also the annual equity filing. It goes public in 10 weeks. Your name will appear in every document circulated to investors, analysts, media. Jennifer will see it. Everyone will see it." "I know." "You could tell her now, before it blindsides her." Robert looked at the brown accordion folder sitting on the counter. Unremarkable except for the label printed along one edge. Hailstorm Logistics Equity Distribution, Williams R. He hadn't opened it in weeks. Didn't need to. The numbers hadn't changed. She needs to see it herself. When she's not ready. That's when we learn what kind of person she actually is. Richard sighed. Not disagreement. Just exhaustion. "Your call." They hung up. Robert set the phone down. Beside it, the folder. He picked it up. Opened it. Inside, the document that had defined his life for the past 4 years. Hailstorm Logistics. Equity Distribution Summary. 2 names. 2 percentages. Jennifer Miller, 50%. Robert Williams, 50%. Her father, Daniel Martinez, had set it up that way 10 years ago when they'd founded the company. Equal partners, equal risk, equal reward. They'd built it together, fought about every major decision, made each other better through constant disagreement. Then, Daniel had died. Stroke. Sudden. At his desk on a Tuesday afternoon with a half-finished email still on his screen. Robert had been at the hospital when it happened. His wife, Laura, 7 months pregnant, complications the doctors had been monitoring for weeks. He'd been sitting beside her bed when his phone rang with the news. Daniel Martinez was dead. The board was meeting. They needed Robert there. He hadn't gone. Laura had needed him more. Emily had needed him more. The board had met anyway, made decisions. Appointed Daniel's daughter Jennifer as CEO. She'd been 30 years old, brilliant, ruthless in the way young people are ruthless when they haven't learned yet what breaks. They'd assumed she'd inherited her father's 50%. They'd assumed Robert had some minor stake, 5% maybe, founder's scraps, enough to be respectful but not enough to matter. Nobody had checked the actual paperwork. Nobody had asked. Robert had let them assume, because he'd wanted to see what Jennifer would do when she thought she had total control. So far, what she'd done was move fast and break things. He closed the folder, set it back on the counter, turned off the kitchen light, stood in the dark for a moment, thinking about a woman he'd never actually met who was running a company he still owned half of, making decisions that would either prove her father right or prove him wrong. In 10 weeks, she'd know the truth. In 10 weeks, everything would change. Robert went to bed. The next morning started the same. 5:30, garage, engine trouble on a different vehicle this time. Emily appeared with coffee at 6. They had the same conversation they always had, variations on a theme, the comfortable rhythm of two people who knew each other's patterns. At 7:45, Robert's phone buzzed. Dispatch, priority pickup, hailstorm logistics executive entrance, 8 o'clock. He dropped Emily at school, drove to Midtown, pulled up to the glass tower at 7:57. Waited. 8 o'clock came. Nobody appeared. 8:05. Still nothing. 8:07. The doors opened. A woman stepped out. 34 years old, dark hair pulled back with surgical precision, wearing a coat that cost more than Robert's monthly rent. Phone to her ear, eyes on the screen, moving fast. Jennifer Miller, CEO, daughter of his dead partner, the woman who thought she owned the company outright. Behind her, an assistant carrying 2 paper cups of coffee, struggling to keep up. Jennifer didn't look at the car, didn't look at Robert, just kept walking, kept talking into her phone, assumed the world would arrange itself around her because it always had. The assistant reached the car first, fumbled with the door. One of the coffee cups tilted. Robert saw it happening, saw the physics of it, the angle, the momentum, the inevitable result. He didn't move, just watched. Jennifer walked straight into the assistant. Not hard, just the collision of 2 people occupying the same space, one paying attention and one not. The coffee cup tilted further. The lid came loose. Hot liquid arced through the air in a slow, almost graceful curve. It didn't hit the marble, didn't hit the assistant, didn't hit Robert. It landed on Jennifer Miller's right shoe. Louboutin. Red sole visible for just a second. $1,200 worth of Italian leather and status. The lobby went silent. That specific silence that happens when the most powerful person in a room suddenly stops moving. Jennifer looked down at her shoe, looked at the spreading stain, looked at the assistant, who'd gone pale. Then she looked at Robert. He was already reaching into his jacket pocket, pulled out a cloth. Not because this was his fault, just because he was the kind of man who carried one. "Do you know what you just ruined?" Her voice wasn't loud, didn't need to be. It carried across the marble like a gavel coming down, final and cold and absolutely certain of its authority. Robert said nothing, stood there with the cloth in his hand. A security guard materialized at his elbow with a folded towel. Stephen Clark, building manager, appeared on Jennifer's other side, already assessing, already managing. Someone at the back of the lobby laughed. Short sound, reflexive, escaped before the brain could stop it. Others followed, quieter, unsure, looking between the woman in the expensive coat and the man in the worn jacket like they were watching a verdict being delivered. Stephen Clark held out the towel to Robert. "Clean it up." Not mean, not kind, just automatic, the way someone gives an order to someone they assume will follow it. Robert looked at the cloth in his hand, looked at the floor, made a calculation that had nothing to do with pride and nothing to do with anger. Something else entirely, something that required more patience than either of those. He lowered himself slowly. knelt on the marble, began to wipe the floor near her shoe. 4 seconds. Nobody breathed. A man at the far edge of the lobby, older, silver hair, wearing the expression of someone who'd survived too many boardrooms to be surprised by anything anymore, squinted at Robert. George Harris, VP of Operations. Something moved across his face, recognition that didn't fully ignite, like a word on the tip of the tongue that refused to come. He said nothing, turned away. Robert finished, stood, handed the cloth back, didn't look at Jennifer, walked to the reception desk, collected the leather folio a client had left in his car yesterday, walked out through the glass doors. He didn't hurry, didn't look back, just moved through the space like he'd made a decision about something nobody else had noticed yet. Outside, he got into his car, pulled away from the curb, merged into traffic. His phone buzzed. Emily, texting from school even though she wasn't supposed to have her phone out during class. "Forgot my science folder, can you bring it?" Robert smiled, typed back. "It's in your backpack side pocket." 3 dots. Then, "Oh, thanks." He pocketed the phone, drove. The city moved around him, ordinary and complicated, full of people making assumptions about each other based on nothing but what they could see. That afternoon he picked Emily up at 3:15. She came down the steps scanning the curb for his car with the focused attention of someone who took arrivals seriously, reached the sedan, climbed into the back seat, dropped her backpack beside her. She noticed the mark on his sleeve before he'd even started the engine. Coffee stain, faint but visible. Somebody was mean today. Not a question, just reading evidence. Robert glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Somebody didn't know who I was yet." Emily looked out the window, watched the city slide past, thought about this for a full block before responding. "You never tell anyone who you are." It wasn't an accusation, just an observation she'd clearly been holding for a while. "No." "Why not?" He thought about it before answering. She always appreciated when he did that, when he treated her questions like they deserved actual consideration instead of automatic responses. "Because I want to see who they are first, before they know to behave differently." Emily absorbed this, filed it somewhere permanent. "What if they're mean to you?" Then later, when they find out, we see what kind of sorry they give, the kind that changes something, or the kind that just sounds nice for a minute. She nodded once, slow, understanding settling into place. "I don't need them to know anyway. I already know who you are." Robert didn't answer, but when he stopped at the next red light, he reached back. She took his hand, small fingers pressing once before letting go. Then she looked back out the window like it hadn't happened, which was exactly how she always did it. They drove home, made dinner together. Spaghetti, garlic bread, salad from a bag. Emily set the table while Robert cooked. They ate, talked about her day, about Marcus's escaped lizard, about the math test on Friday she wasn't worried about. After she went to bed, Robert sat in the kitchen again. Same glass of water, same phone vibrating. He picked it up. Richard Davis, again. "I heard what happened this morning." Robert waited. "Building security footage, the lobby incident. Stephen Clark's been suspended pending review. Turns out asking a company equity holder to clean floors in front of witnesses is the kind of thing HR takes seriously. I didn't file a complaint. You didn't have to. George Harris was there. He's on the board. He saw the whole thing. Didn't recognize you at the time, but he pulled your employee photo this afternoon, made some calls." Robert leaned back, looked at the ceiling. "How's Jennifer taking it?" "She doesn't know yet. She's been in back-to-back meetings all day, but she will, tomorrow morning. The board chairman's calling her personally." Silence. "Robert, this is going to accelerate the timeline. The filing was already coming in 10 weeks. Now the board's going to push for you to return immediately. They're worried about optics, about liability, about—" "Tell them not yet. They're not going to accept that much longer. They don't have a choice. I still own half the company. They can ask. I can say no." Richard sighed. "What are you waiting for?" Robert looked at the accordion folder on the counter. I'm waiting to see if she's capable of learning, or if she's just capable of being right. There's a difference? There's a big difference. They hung up. Robert sat in the dark kitchen, thought about a woman who'd looked at him like he was nobody, who'd watched him kneel, who'd accepted it as the natural order of things. He thought about what his partner, her father, had said in the hospital. Those last words before the stroke took him completely. Jennifer doesn't know what she doesn't know. You have to watch over her. You have to be there when she's ready. Robert had promised, had meant it. But ready didn't mean now. Ready meant when the lesson would actually teach her something. When the stakes were high enough that she'd remember what she learned. 10 weeks. Maybe less now, depending on how fast the board moved. He could wait 10 weeks. He'd already waited 4 years. The next morning, Robert's phone showed a different kind of notification. Updated assignment. Effective immediately. He opened it. Jennifer Miller's regular driver had called in sick. The dispatch system had automatically assigned a replacement based on availability, schedule compatibility, and performance metrics. The replacement was Robert Williams, contract driver number 447. Starting tomorrow, he would be driving the CEO of Hailstorm Logistics to and from every appointment, every meeting, every destination she needed to reach. Robert read the notification twice. Thought about the mathematics of coincidence versus the mathematics of pattern. Thought about Richard Davis and his tendency to make helpful suggestions to dispatch supervisors who owed him favors. He didn't call Richard to ask. Didn't need confirmation. Tomorrow morning, he'd pull up to the executive entrance at exactly 8 o'clock. Jennifer Miller would slide into the back seat of his car. She'd look at him in the rearview mirror, if she looked at all. She might recognize his face. Might not. Either way, she wouldn't know who he was. Not yet. Robert set his phone down. Looked at the accordion folder one more time. 50%. Equal partners. Equal stakes. He'd stepped back to see what she would do with power. Now he'd step forward to see what she would do with proximity. The truth would surface eventually. It always did. The only question was whether she'd still be worth saving when it finally arrived. Robert turned off the light, went to bed. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. But he was ready. He'd been ready for 4 years. What do you do when someone refuses good advice just because of who's giving it? Robert pulled the black sedan up to Hailstorm's executive entrance at exactly 8 o'clock Monday morning. November air cold enough to sting, sky the color of old concrete. He'd been up since 5, same as always. Coffee with Emily, drop off at school. Now this. The glass doors opened. Jennifer Miller stepped out, phone already to her ear, tablet tucked under one arm. Same coat as before, different shoes. She moved like someone who'd calculated the exact number of steps required to cross any given distance and refused to waste a single one. Robert got out, opened the rear door. She slid in without looking at him, kept talking into her phone. No, I told Marcus the timeline stands. We're not pushing the migration back just because the tech team wants another round of testing. We tested it. It works. We move forward. Robert closed her door, got behind the wheel, adjusted the mirror. Her face appeared in the frame for half a second before her eyes dropped back to the tablet. He pulled out into traffic. She worked the entire ride. Emails, documents, a video call with someone in Chicago about vendor contracts. Never once looked up, never acknowledged he existed beyond the function he served. At 8:43 they arrived at her first meeting. Financial district. Glass building identical to every other glass building. She got out mid-sentence, door already closing behind her before Robert could move to open it. He sat in the car, waited, checked the schedule on his phone. Next pickup at 10:15, same location. 2 hours. He pulled around the corner, found street parking, opened his laptop. VPN into Hailstorm systems took 15 seconds. His co-founder access had never been revoked. Nobody remembered it existed. He navigated to the operations dashboard, pulled up the system logs from the past week. Migration protocols, performance metrics, error rates, The numbers told a story. Throughput up 18%, response times down 12%, success rate hovering at 94%. Good numbers, the kind of numbers that made executives feel smart. Robert drilled deeper, pulled the error logs, filtered by category. There, routing anomalies, 0.3% of total volume. Statistically insignificant. Well, within acceptable parameters, except they shouldn't exist at all. He traced one. Shipment routed from Baltimore to a distribution hub in Northern Virginia that the system should have known was at capacity. The shipment sat there for 6 hours before being manually redirected. He traced another. Time-sensitive pharmaceutical cargo assigned to a carrier that had already departed. Missed the delivery window by 40 minutes. Small errors, easily corrected. The kind of thing that got lost in the noise of 40,000 decisions per hour. But they were there, and they were increasing. 0.28% last week, 0.3% this week, if the trend held, 0.35% next week. Still statistically insignificant, still within parameters, until peak season hit in January, until volume doubled and those small errors compounded into cascade failures that brought down entire regional networks. Robert made notes, saved the log files, closed the laptop. At 10:15 he pulled back up to the building. Jennifer emerged at 10:18, already on a different call, already moving. She got in. He drove. Same pattern. She worked. He listened. This time she was talking to the CTO. Michael, I don't care if it makes the engineers uncomfortable. We optimized the system. We're seeing better performance. That's what matters. Pause. Listening. They're worried about what? Edge cases? Michael, we can't design for every possible scenario. We design for the probable scenarios, and we move fast. Another pause. No, I'm not authorizing another review cycle. We have metrics. The metrics are good. We're done with this conversation. She hung up, went back to her tablet. Robert took Fifth Avenue. Traffic moderate. He kept 2 car lengths behind the vehicle ahead, maintained smooth acceleration, anticipated lane changes before they happened. The kind of driving that didn't register because nothing went wrong. They arrived at her next meeting 4 minutes early. She got out. This time she paused at the door, looked at him for the first time that day. Actually looked, not at his face, at the dashboard clock. You're efficient. Better than the last driver. Her voice carried the same tone she'd used on the phone. Assessing, cataloging, filing away data. Thank you, ma'am. She walked into the building. Robert sat in the car. Thought about what his daughter had said yesterday. You never tell anyone who you are. No, he didn't. Because this was more informative. The week continued like that. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Same pattern. Jennifer working, Robert driving. She made calls, sent emails, reviewed documents, gave orders. He listened, learned, said nothing. By Wednesday afternoon he had a complete picture of what she was doing. System migration from the original platform he and Daniel had built to a newer architecture the tech team had designed. Faster processing, better optimization algorithms, improved performance metrics across the board, and completely untested under the kind of load the system would face in 6 weeks when holiday shipping hit peak volume. The old platform had been built with redundancies, safeguards, conditions that sacrificed speed for stability when traffic exceeded certain thresholds. Robert had written those conditionals himself. They were invisible under normal operations, only activated when the system detected patterns that indicated approaching cascade failure. The new platform had removed them, not maliciously, just optimized them away, treated them like legacy code, dead weight, inefficiency. The engineers who'd done the migration didn't understand what those conditionals protected against because they'd never seen the system fail. They'd inherited something that worked and made it work faster without understanding why it worked in the first place. Jennifer had approved it because the metrics looked good, because moving fast mattered more than understanding what you were moving. Robert made more notes, watched the error rate tick upward. 0.32% by Wednesday. Still insignificant. Still within parameters. Still going to destroy everything when January came. Thursday morning started the same. Robert pulled up at 8. Jennifer got in, phone to ear. He drove. Traffic looked wrong. Too heavy for this time of morning. He glanced at the route ahead, saw the pattern. Construction crews, orange cones, the kind of closure that backed up 6 blocks in every direction. He'd seen the city maintenance bulletin. Water main work, scheduled for 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. 4-block section on the primary route to the financial district. 2 ways to get there from here. Primary route currently blocked. Alternate route completely clear. Robert slowed at the intersection, looked at Jennifer in the mirror. She was reading something on her tablet, frowning, completely absorbed. He could take the alternate, save 12, maybe 14 minutes, get her there early instead of late. But she hadn't asked, hadn't acknowledged he existed beyond being the thing that moved her from place to place. So he tested her. "Ms. Miller." She looked up. First time she'd responded to him directly. Fifth Avenue would save about 12 minutes. The main route has a water main closure that usually runs until 9:30. Her eyes went back to the tablet. "I don't need suggestions from drivers." Flat. Final. Case closed. Robert said nothing else. Continued on the original route. They hit the gridlock 7 minutes later. Complete stop. Construction crew with jackhammers tearing into asphalt. Pipe sections stacked on flatbed trucks. Not moving. Not going to move. The clock on the dashboard ticked forward. 8:17, 8:23, 8:29. Jennifer didn't speak. Didn't look at the window. Didn't look at Robert. Just kept working on her tablet, jaw tight, fingers moving across the screen with slightly more force than necessary. 8:35. They'd moved 1 block. 8:41. 2 blocks. 8:47. Still 2 blocks from where they needed to be. Finally, traffic broke. The construction zone ended. They cleared the bottleneck and hit normal flow. Arrived at her meeting at 9:03, 18 minutes late. Jennifer got out, paused with the door open. "You should have been clearer." Not looking back, just stating a fact, then gone. Robert sat there, looked at the dashboard clock. Thought about the mathematics of blame versus the mathematics of choice. She'd had the information. She'd chosen not to use it. Now she was recalibrating the past to make it someone else's failure. He'd seen this before, in boardrooms, in negotiations, in every interaction where someone's identity depended on never being wrong. Robert pulled away from the curb, checked his phone. Next pickup at 11. That evening, after Emily was asleep, Robert opened his laptop again, pulled the system logs. The error rate had jumped, 0.4%, small spike, probably unrelated to anything he could measure. But it was there. His phone rang. Richard Davis. "How's it going?" Robert leaned back in his chair. "She's exactly what I thought she'd be." "Which is?" "Smart, driven, completely certain she's right about everything." Richard made a sound that might have been a laugh. "So, like her father?" "No." Daniel knew what he didn't know. "She doesn't." Silence on the line. "The board's getting impatient. They want you back in an official capacity. They're worried about the Q4 numbers and the system migration and a dozen other things Jennifer's pushing through without adequate oversight." "I know what they're worried about." "So come back. You have the authority. You own half the company." Robert looked at the screen. Error logs, performance metrics, the slow creep of failure nobody else was watching for. Not yet. "Robert, she needs to fail first. Just enough to crack that certainty. Not enough to break the company, but enough that when she sees the equity filing, she'll understand why it matters that she didn't know." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "You're gambling with a lot of money." "I'm gambling with whether she's worth her father's faith in her. Money's just the score." They hung up. Robert closed the laptop, sat in the dark kitchen, thought about a man who'd died before he could teach his daughter the most important lesson. That being smart isn't the same as being right. That moving fast isn't the same as moving well. Friday morning. Same routine. Robert picked Jennifer up at 8. She got in, already on a call with someone about client retention numbers. They drove. This time he didn't offer advice, just took the routes he knew would work, got her everywhere on time, perfect execution. She noticed. End of the day, when he dropped her at headquarters, she actually looked at him in the mirror. Much better. Like she was grading him, like he'd learned his lesson. Robert said nothing, just nodded. She got out, disappeared into the building. He sat there, thought about Emily asking why he didn't tell people who he was, thought about his answer. Because I want to see who they are first. He was seeing, and what he saw was someone who needed to be right more than she needed to be good. The weekend passed. Monday came. Another week of driving, another week of listening, another week of watching error rates tick upward while Jennifer pushed harder, moved faster, optimized more. By the second Wednesday, the system was running at 0.51% errors, still within parameters, still invisible to anyone not looking for it. But Robert was looking, and he knew what came next. That night, Emily asked him about his work. Do you like driving her? They were at the kitchen table, homework spread between them, math problems about trains leaving stations. I'm learning about her. Emily looked up from her worksheet. Is she nice? Robert thought about that, about Jennifer's voice when she gave orders, about the way she'd looked at him when he'd knelt on the marble, about her certainty that being right meant she was doing right. She's certain of herself. That's not always the same as being right. Emily went back to her math, worked through another problem. Then, without looking up, when will you tell her the truth? When the truth will teach her something, not before. Emily nodded, like she understood, like she'd already figured out that timing mattered more than honesty sometimes. Robert helped her finish her homework. They made dinner, watched her read before bed. The ordinary enormous business of being a parent to someone who was smarter than most adults gave her credit for. After she was asleep, his phone rang. Richard again. There's a problem. Robert waited. The system. The migration you've been monitoring. Something's wrong. The board got a report from one of the regional managers. Shipments are getting misrouted. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough that clients are asking questions. What's the error rate? 0.6% as of this afternoon. Robert closed his eyes. Faster than he'd projected. The curve was steepening. What's Jennifer saying? That it's within acceptable parameters. That all systems have errors. That the performance gains outweigh the minimal disruption. And the board? Split. Half agree with her. Half want to revert to the old platform until they can figure out what's wrong. Robert stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city, lit up against the November dark. Don't revert. Not yet. Robert, if this gets worse, it will get worse. That's the point. She needs to see it get worse. She needs to understand what happens when you optimize for speed without understanding what you're removing. And if it breaks completely, it won't. Not yet. We've got time. How much time? Robert looked at the calendar on his phone. 6 weeks until peak holiday volume. 6 weeks until the system faced real stress. Enough. Richard didn't sound convinced, but he didn't argue. They hung up. Robert stood at the window, thought about his partner, about Daniel's last words. Watch over her. Be there when she's ready. He was watching, and she wasn't ready. Not yet. But she would be. Soon. The crisis arrived on a Wednesday morning without announcement, without warning, without the courtesy of a single point of failure that would be easy to identify. Robert was driving Jennifer to her first meeting when his phone lit up with alerts. System notifications, critical errors, performance degradation across multiple regional hubs. Jennifer's phone started ringing. She answered. What do you mean the system's down? Her voice sharp, controlled, but something underneath it now, something that hadn't been there before. No, that's not possible. We just ran diagnostics yesterday. Everything was green. Pause. Listening. I don't care what the error logs say. Get Michael on it. Get the whole team on it. I want this fixed in an hour." She hung up, made another call, then another. By the time they reached her destination, she'd canceled the meeting and redirected Robert back to headquarters. "Operations floor. Fast." Robert drove. Didn't speed. Didn't take risks. Just moved through traffic with the efficiency of someone who knew every alternate route, every timing pattern, every gap. They arrived in 14 minutes. Jennifer was out before the car stopped moving. Robert pulled into the parking structure. Sat there, looked at his phone. The system wasn't down. That would have been simpler. Instead, it was doing exactly what it had been programmed to do: processing requests, generating confirmations, routing shipments, all of it wrong. 40,000 decisions per hour, every single one formatted correctly, every single one completely incorrect. Shipments going to full warehouses, time-sensitive cargo on slow routes, priority clients buried under bulk freight. The cascade Jennifer's team had optimized away every safeguard against. Robert got out of the car, took the elevator up, not to the operations floor, to parking level 2, the maintenance area where the technical team kept backup workstations. He found 2 engineers there, young, panicking, staring at screens full of data they couldn't interpret. One of them was on the phone. "I don't know. The system's executing perfectly. It's just executing the wrong instructions. Every diagnostic we run comes back clean." Robert walked over, looked at their screen. "Pull up the distribution logic." They turned, looked at him, contract driver. Nobody. "Who are you?" "Someone who's seen this before. Pull up the distribution logic, not the routing layer, the layer underneath it, the original weighting structure." The engineer closest to the keyboard hesitated, then did it. The code appeared on screen. Robert leaned in, scanned the functions, found the section he'd written 8 years ago, saw immediately what was wrong. The conditional he'd built to prevent exactly this failure had been inverted, probably during one of the optimization passes. Someone had looked at it, thought it was backwards, fixed it, made it correct according to logic, made it catastrophic according to reality. Under normal load, the inversion was invisible. The condition never triggered. The system ran fine. Under peak load, the condition triggered constantly, and every time it triggered, it made the exact opposite decision it was supposed to make. Cascade, failure, exactly what he'd designed the original conditional to prevent. "There." Robert pointed at the screen. The engineers leaned in. "That's inverted. Flip the logic. The system's optimizing for throughput when it should be optimizing for stability." "How do you know?" Robert looked at them. 2 kids in their 20s who'd been handed a system they didn't understand and told to make it better. "Because I wrote that conditional. I know what it was designed to protect against." The elevator doors opened behind them. Jennifer stepped out, scanning the room, saw Robert at the workstation, walked over. "What are you doing down here?" Her voice tight, strained, the first crack in her certainty. "I heard your team in the elevator. The way they described the problem, I've seen it before." "You're a driver." "Yes." He let that sit for a second. Then, "I also helped design this system." The room went silent. Both engineers turned to look at him. Jennifer's face didn't change expression, but something behind it moved, recalibrating. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what breaks when you optimize without understanding what you're removing." Michael Thompson appeared from the elevator, CTO 52, graying, carrying the specific exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting fires for 9 hours straight. "Jennifer, we've isolated the—" He saw Robert. Stopped. "Who's this?" Robert didn't answer, just turned back to the screen. "The conditional here. It's inverted. Flip it back. System will stabilize in about 20 minutes. Michael walked over, looked at the code, looked at Robert. "How do you know?" "Because I wrote it, 8 years ago, when we built the original platform." Michael's eyes narrowed, started to say something, stopped, pulled out his phone, typed something, stared at the result. Then he looked at Jennifer. "This is Robert Williams." Jennifer's face went completely blank. "The co-founder, the one who left 4 years ago." The silence that followed had weight, physical presence, the kind of quiet that changes what everyone thought they knew about the room they were standing in. Robert didn't wait for her to process. Turned to the engineers. "Fix the conditional, run a propagation test, then implement across all regional hubs. You've got maybe 2 hours before client contracts start getting pulled." He walked to the elevator. Jennifer didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him go. The doors closed. Robert descended to the parking level, got in his car, sat there. His phone rang. "Richard Davis. The board just called an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. "I know. They're going to ask you to come." "I know that too. Are you ready?" Robert looked at the concrete ceiling of the parking structure. Thought about a woman upstairs who'd just discovered that the man she'd watched kneel on marble owned as much of her company as she did. "Yes." Thursday morning, 41st floor conference room. Robert arrived at 8:50. Board members already assembled. Jennifer sat at the head of the table, saw him enter. Her face showed nothing. The chairman called the meeting to order. "Situation contained. 3 clients confirmed. The $300 million account will continue pending technical audit. Total exposure reduced from catastrophic to manageable." He looked around the table. "Attributed to intervention by someone with intimate knowledge of the platform's original architecture." Clicked a remote. Screen lit up at the far end of the room. Document. Equity Distribution Summary. Hailstorm Logistics Holdings. 2 names. 2 percentages. Jennifer Miller, 50%. Robert Williams, 50%. The room made no sound. 10 people staring. Jennifer read the name once, twice, 3 times. Her hands pressed flat against the table, fingers spread, knuckles white. George Harris, the VP who'd been in the lobby, nodded slowly. "I knew I recognized him." The chairman gestured to the empty chair at the far end of the table, directly across from Jennifer. "Mr. Williams, thank you for joining us." Robert walked the length of the room, set his brown accordion folder on the table, sat down. "I believe I was asked to attend." "You were." Jennifer's voice came out steady, controlled, but something underneath it now, something new. "I owe you an apology." Robert looked at her across the full length of polished wood. Noted. She waited for more. Nothing came. "What do you want?" "I want to understand whether this company is still what it was built to be." "I don't understand the question." "I didn't step back for 4 years because I stopped caring. I stepped back to see what you would do with it." He let that settle. Let her process the implications, that he'd been watching, that every decision she'd made had been observed, that her certainty had been a test she hadn't known she was taking. "Some of what you did was strong. Some of it worried me. The platform failure happened because you rebuilt infrastructure you didn't understand. Your team told you it was better. You didn't verify." Jennifer's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "So the problem wasn't just technical." "No. The problem was assuming that title equals knowledge, that moving fast means moving well, that optimization without understanding is the same thing as progress." Around the table, board members watched. Some nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. George Harris watched Jennifer's face with something that might have been sympathy. Robert opened his folder, pulled out a document, slid it down the table. "There are 3 other modules that were restructured the same way. They're holding now. They won't hold when January volume hits. 6 weeks, maybe less." Jennifer picked up the document, read it. "You already know where they are." "I do." "Will you help fix them?" Robert leaned back. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're willing to do the slow, hard work of actually understanding what you're changing. Not just patching problems. Learning the system. Knowing what you're protecting before you decide it's inefficient." Jennifer set the document down, looked at him with something in her face he hadn't seen before. Not anger, not embarrassment, something closer to recognition. "I am." "We'll see." Robert stood, picked up his folder, walked toward the door. "Mr. Williams." He stopped, turned. The chairman was standing. "The board would like you to return in an official capacity, whatever role you feel appropriate." "Not yet. The company needs its CEO to learn what leadership actually requires. I'll help, on my terms, when I decide it's time." He walked out, left them sitting there, left Jennifer at the head of a table in a room full of people who now knew she'd been running a company she only half owned while humiliating the man who owned the other half. Robert took the elevator down, picked up Emily from school at 3:15. She climbed into the back seat with her backpack and a question already forming. "How was your day?" "Interesting." She looked at him in the mirror, studied his face. "Good interesting or bad interesting?" "We'll see." She smiled, went back to her homework. By the time they got home, she'd finished 2 worksheets and started a third. That evening, Robert's phone showed a new message. Jennifer Miller. First time she'd contacted him directly. "Meeting tomorrow. 4 p.m. My office. Please." He stared at the word please. Wondered if she'd ever used it with a subordinate before. He typed back one word. "Address?" She sent it. Brooklyn. His apartment building. She was coming to him. Robert set the phone down, looked at Emily doing homework at the kitchen table, thought about what came next, about whether Jennifer Miller was capable of learning or just capable of adapting her certainty to new information. Tomorrow, he'd find out. How many brilliant people do we walk past every day, never knowing their value? How often do we judge by what we see instead of what's real? The knock came at exactly 4 o'clock. Robert had been expecting it. Emily had been watching the door since 3:45, homework abandoned, stationed on the couch with a book she wasn't reading. Robert opened the door. Jennifer Miller stood on the landing. No coat this time, just a dark blazer over a white shirt, jeans he'd never seen her wear, hair pulled back but looser than usual. She looked like someone who'd dressed for a business meeting and then changed her mind halfway through. She looked at Robert, then past him into the apartment, saw Emily on the couch. Emily stood up, walked to the doorway, stopped 3 feet from Jennifer and just looked at her. That particular stillness Emily had, the kind that made adults uncomfortable because it didn't come with the usual social padding children learn to deploy. "You're the one who made my dad kneel down." Not angry, not accusing, just stating a fact for the record. Jennifer froze, literally stopped moving. For maybe the first time in her adult life, she had absolutely no idea what to say. Robert watched the moment stretch, watched Jennifer's face cycle through responses she was trained for and discard all of them because none of them fit. Finally Jennifer spoke, voice quieter than he'd ever heard it. "Yes, I am." Emily studied her, calculating something. Then, "He said someone who doesn't know who he is yet isn't the same as a bad person." Jennifer blinked, looked at Robert, back at Emily. "That's a generous interpretation." "I know." Emily stepped back from the door, gestured into the apartment with the same casual authority she used when inviting her friends over. "He's in the kitchen." Then she walked back to the couch, picked up her book, pretended to read while listening to absolutely everything. Jennifer stood in the doorway. Robert stepped aside. She came in. The apartment was small. The kind of small that came from rent control and priorities that didn't include impressing anyone. Kitchen visible from the front door. Living room barely big enough for the couch and the bookshelf. Drawings on the refrigerator held up by magnets. One showed 2 people in front of a building with 12 windows. A dog sat near the entrance. They didn't own a dog. Jennifer looked at the drawing, looked away, followed Robert into the kitchen. He was already at the counter. Coffee maker that had been repaired twice, visible solder marks on the base. He poured 2 cups without asking if she wanted one. "You didn't need to come here." Jennifer took the cup, wrapped both hands around it like she was cold, even though the apartment was warm. I wanted to. Robert gestured at the small table. 2 chairs. They sat. The silence that followed had texture. Jennifer looked at her coffee. Robert waited. He was good at waiting. He'd had 4 years of practice. Finally she spoke. "Tell me about the original system. What it was designed to do. What my father and you built together." Robert looked at her. Something in his face shifted. Not softening exactly. More like a door opening that had been closed. "Your father wanted to scale as fast as possible. Move into new markets. Add new clients. Grow the infrastructure to match demand. I wanted to build something that held under pressure, that didn't collapse the first time volume exceeded projections." He paused, drank coffee. "We argued about it constantly. Every major decision. He'd push for speed. I'd push for stability. We'd fight. We'd compromise. We'd build something better than either of us would have built alone." Jennifer's hands tightened around the cup. "He was right about the timing, market window, competitive advantage, first mover benefits, all of that." Robert nodded. "And I was right about the pressure. Systems that can't handle stress don't just slow down. They invert. They make the opposite decision they're supposed to make. They cascade." He looked at her directly. "The company is better for every one of those arguments. Every fight we had made us sharper, made the product stronger, made the foundation hold when it should have cracked." Jennifer set her cup down. Her hands were shaking slightly. "And the rebuild that caused this week's failure? Your team optimized for speed, removed conditionals they thought were inefficient. They didn't know what those conditionals were protecting because they'd never seen the system under real stress." Robert leaned forward. "If you don't know what something is protecting, you can't see what you're removing when you take it away. You just see old code, legacy thinking, inefficiency." Jennifer's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "I inherited something I didn't fully understand." Her voice came out steady, but quiet. The kind of quiet that cost something. "And I was too certain of my own judgment to learn it from the ground up. I trusted metrics. I trusted my team. I trusted that being smart was the same as being right." She looked at her hands. "That is not a posture I intend to continue." Robert studied her, watched her face, looked for the thing he'd been looking for since the moment in the lobby. The crack in the certainty, the space where learning could happen. He saw it. Small, new, fragile. "Will you help me fix the other 3 modules?" Robert leaned back. Let the question sit between them. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're willing to do the slow, hard work of actually understanding what you're changing. Not just patching problems. Not just trusting the next round of metrics. Learning the system. Knowing what it protects before you decide it's outdated." Jennifer met his eyes. "I am." Robert looked at her for a long moment. The kind of assessment that went deeper than words. That measured intention against capacity. That tried to see whether someone could become what they claimed they wanted to be. "We'll see." The sound from the living room was careful, deliberate. Emily's book closing. Footsteps. She appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Can we eat?" She looked at Robert, at Jennifer, back at Robert, waiting for an answer to a question she wasn't quite asking. Robert looked at his daughter, at the woman sitting across from him, at the space between what was and what might be. He stood, opened the cabinet, took down a 3rd bowl. Didn't say anything. Just set it on the counter beside the other 2. Jennifer stared at it, at what it meant, at the gesture she hadn't asked for and didn't know if she deserved. "I should go." Emily's voice came quick, certain. "You don't have to." Jennifer looked at the 7-year-old who'd opened the door with a judgment and was now offering something else entirely. "I'm not a very good dinner guest." Emily shrugged with the specific confidence of someone who'd already decided this wasn't a problem. "That's okay. Dad burns the rice sometimes." Robert made a sound in his throat. Not quite a laugh, more like surrender to a truth he couldn't deny. "I do not burn the rice." Emily held up 2 fingers, completely calm. "2 times. Last month. Once. 2. The certainty in her voice left no room for negotiation. Robert looked at Jennifer. Jennifer was watching this exchange with something in her face he'd never seen before. Not the controlled professional mask, not the calculated assessment. Something open, unguarded, almost vulnerable. Robert turned back to the stove, started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, vegetables, rice, chicken he'd been planning to cook for just himself and Emily. Jennifer stayed. They ate at the small table, 3 bowls, 3 glasses of water because Jennifer declined the wine Robert offered, said she needed to think clearly. Emily told her about the drawing on the refrigerator, why the building had 12 windows instead of 4, why they didn't have a dog yet but would someday. Jennifer asked questions, actually listened to the answers instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. Asked Emily about school, about math, about what she wanted to be when she grew up. Emily said maybe an engineer, maybe an architect, maybe someone who built things that lasted. Jennifer glanced at Robert when Emily said that. He was looking at his daughter with an expression Jennifer was starting to recognize. Pride mixed with something deeper. The specific love of a parent who'd raised a child alone and seen them turn out better than he'd hoped. The city outside went from gray to dark, kitchen lights warm against the November cold. They finished eating. Emily helped clear the table. Jennifer offered to help with dishes. Robert said no, guests didn't do dishes. Jennifer said she wasn't really a guest. Robert didn't argue. Let her dry while he washed. Emily settled back on the couch with her book, actually reading now. The adults worked in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. When they finished, Jennifer stood in the kitchen, didn't move toward the door, just stood there like someone who'd arrived at a destination they hadn't known they were looking for. "Thank you." "For what?" "For the 3rd bowl." Robert dried his hands, looked at her. "Don't thank me for basic decency." "It wasn't basic. Not after what I did." "No. But Emily was right. Someone who doesn't know who someone is yet isn't the same as a bad person. Just someone who hasn't learned what they need to know." Jennifer's eyes went bright. Not quite tears, but close. She looked away. Looked back. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. Bring your CTO. Bring your best systems engineer. We'll walk through the architecture. All of it. Every module. Every conditional. Every safeguard you don't understand yet." "How long will that take?" "As long as it takes." Jennifer nodded, moved toward the door, stopped when Emily called out from the couch. "Bye, Jennifer." Not Ms. Miller, just Jennifer. Like they were friends now. Like a 7-year-old had decided the trial was over and the verdict was in. Jennifer's voice came out softer than Robert had heard it. "Bye, Emily." She left. Robert stood in the doorway watching her descend the stairs, watched her pause on the sidewalk, watched her stand there for a full minute, not moving, not checking her phone, just standing in the November night like someone trying to figure out where they were. Then she walked away, disappeared into the city. Robert closed the door, locked it, turned around. Emily was watching him from the couch. "I like her." "You just met her." "I know, but I like her anyway." Robert sat down beside his daughter. She leaned against him. They sat like that for a while. No words, just the comfortable silence of 2 people who understood each other without needing to explain. That night, after Emily was asleep, Robert sat in the kitchen, thought about what he'd seen in Jennifer's face, the crack in the certainty, the willingness to admit she didn't know, the humility that came from being wrong about something that mattered. His phone buzzed. Message from Jennifer. "Thank you for tonight. I'll bring Michael and Sarah tomorrow." 9 a.m., Robert typed back. "Make it 8. We have a lot to cover." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I'll be there." Robert set the phone down, opened his laptop, pulled up the system architecture, started making notes about what they'd need to review. The modules, the conditionals, the philosophy behind the design. It would take weeks, maybe months. But if Jennifer was actually willing to learn, if she could set aside her need to be right long enough to understand what being good required, then maybe she was worth the faith her father had placed in her. Maybe. 3 weeks passed like water finding its level, slow, inevitable, reshaping everything it touched. Jennifer showed up at Hailstorm headquarters every morning at 8, brought Michael Thompson, the CTO, and Sarah Kim, lead systems engineer. Robert met them in the conference room on the 41st floor, the same room where the board had revealed his equity stake. Different purpose now. He walked them through the architecture, layer by layer, module by module, explained not just what the code did, but why it existed, what it protected, what happened when you removed it. Jennifer asked questions, actual questions, not challenges disguised as inquiries, not attempts to prove she already understood, real questions from someone trying to learn something they'd realized they didn't know. By the end of week 1, they'd mapped the 3 critical modules Robert had flagged, understood where the conditionals had been removed, understood what would happen when January volume hit if they didn't fix it. By the end of week 2, Sarah had rewritten the first module. Robert reviewed it, found 2 errors, explained why they mattered. Sarah fixed them, showed him again. This time, it was right. By the end of week 3, all 3 modules were corrected, tested, ready for deployment. They were in a systems review meeting when it happened. Jennifer's tech director, a man named Andrew, who'd been with the company 2 years, presented an efficiency upgrade for one of the modules they'd just fixed. "We can shave another 8% off processing time if we adjust the weighting algorithm here." He pointed at the screen. Robert saw it immediately. The same mistake. Different module. Same fundamental misunderstanding. Jennifer stopped him. "What are we losing to gain that 8%? Andrew blinked, looked at her like she'd asked the question in a foreign language. "Losing? What is this protecting that we'd be removing?" The room went quiet. Andrew looked at the screen. Really looked. Tried to answer a question he'd never been asked before. I'm not sure." Jennifer's voice stayed level, patient, not angry, just clear. "Then I'd like the answer before we proceed. Show me what breaks if we make this change. Show me the stress test results. Show me what happens when we're wrong." Andrew nodded, sat down, started pulling up documentation. Robert watched Jennifer's face, saw her ask the question her father would have asked, saw her refuse to move forward without understanding the cost. That evening, Robert was outside Emily's school at 3:15 when his phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. "Systems review went well. Andrew's doing the stress tests now. Thank you for teaching me the right question." Robert didn't respond immediately. Thought about it, about what it meant that she was thanking him for something she should have been doing all along. But growth started somewhere, usually started small. He typed back, "You asked it, that's what matters. 3 dots. Then, still learning when to ask it soon enough." Robert smiled, put the phone away. Emily came down the school steps with her backpack and a question already forming. "Is Jennifer coming over again?" "I don't know. Why?" "I want to show her my science project." "What's your science project?" "How bridges hold weight. I built a model. It can hold 17 books before it breaks." Robert looked at his daughter, at the kid who'd decided to study how things held under pressure, who'd built something designed to carry more than anyone expected. "If she comes over, you can show her." Emily climbed into the back seat, satisfied, started her homework before they'd left the parking lot. The last Friday of November came cold and bright. Robert finished his morning work with Hailstorm's tech team by 11, had the afternoon free, was about to leave the building when his phone buzzed. Jennifer. Not a text, an actual call. "Do you have a minute?" "Sure." "Can you come up to my office?" Robert took the elevator to the 41st floor. found her office. Corner space, glass walls, view of the city that probably cost more than his annual salary used to. Jennifer stood at the window, turned when he came in. The board approved the module corrections. Michael presented the full technical audit this morning. They're implementing across all regional hubs starting Monday. Good. She walked to her desk, picked up something, a piece of paper, folded once. I found this in the conference room, after the board meeting, 3 weeks ago. She handed it to him. He unfolded it. Emily's drawing. 2 people in front of a building with 12 windows. The dog they didn't have yet. Emily left it there when she came to the office with me one afternoon. I've been looking at it for 3 days. Robert looked at the drawing, at his daughter's careful lines, at the building she'd imagined, at the space she'd left for someone else. She gave this building 12 windows and a dog. Jennifer's voice came quiet. I know. I've been wondering what it means. Robert looked at her, at the woman who'd humiliated him in a lobby full of strangers, who'd refused his advice because of who she thought he was, who'd learned slowly and painfully that certainty and knowledge weren't the same thing. It means she sees things before we do. She draws what could be, not what is. Jennifer nodded, looked at the drawing. If she wants it back, you'll have to come get it. Robert heard the subtext, the invitation, the question she wasn't asking directly. Keep it. She can make another one. She's good at imagining things that don't exist yet. He handed the drawing back. Jennifer took it, set it on her desk, looked at it like it was the most important document in the building. Robert left, took the elevator down, picked up Emily from school at 3:15. She came down the steps scanning the curb for his car, climbed into the back seat with her backpack and her homework and a question. Are we going straight home? Robert put the car in drive, looked at her in the rearview mirror. Not right away. Emily's face didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. That particular stillness she had when she already knew the answer before she asked the question. Are we going to see her? Robert looked at his daughter, at the kid who'd opened a door and spoken plainly and offered a third bowl without ceremony, at the person who'd decided forgiveness was possible before any of the adults had figured it out. We might. Emily nodded once, like she'd already known, like this had been obvious to her for weeks. She took out her homework, started working on math problems, completely calm, completely certain. Robert drove through the November afternoon, the city cold and gray and ordinary, full of people who hadn't met each other yet, full of stories that hadn't started, full of versions of the future that existed only in the space between what was and what might be. That was the thing about not yet. It was never an ending. It was only ever direction, only ever the gap between where you stood and where you could go if you were willing to learn what you didn't know. Robert thought about Jennifer standing in his kitchen, about the third bowl, about the questions she was starting to ask, about the person she might become if she kept asking them. He thought about his daughter's drawing. 2 people, 12 windows, a dog, space for something that didn't exist yet but could. Emily looked up from her homework. Dad? Yeah? When we get the dog, can it sleep in my room? Robert almost smiled. We'll see. That means yes. That means we'll see. She settled back into her seat, satisfied, went back to her math problems like the question had been answered even though it hadn't. The traffic light ahead turned yellow. Robert slowed, stopped, looked at the rear-view mirror. Emily working, city moving, everything ordinary, everything exactly as it should be. The light turned green. He drove forward. Forgiveness doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in moments, small choices, third bowls and honest questions and 7-year-olds who see things before adults do. Jennifer Miller had been certain of herself, certain of her judgment, certain that being smart meant being right. She'd learned, slowly and painfully, that certainty was different from wisdom, that knowing was different from understanding, that leadership required humility more than it required confidence. Robert Williams had watched and waited, had let her fail just enough to crack the armor, had been there when she was ready to learn, had kept his promise to a dying man who'd asked him to watch over a daughter who didn't know what she didn't know. Now they stood in the space between what had been and what might be, between the humiliation and the healing, between the mistake and the growth. Emily had drawn that space. Two people, a building that didn't exist yet, a dog they didn't own, windows that let light in. She'd seen it before any of them, because children see what's possible without the weight of what's already failed. Robert pulled up to Jennifer's building. She was waiting outside, saw the car, saw Emily in the back seat, smiled, got in. Emily looked up from her homework. "Hi, Jennifer." "Hi, Emily." Robert pulled back into traffic. 3 people in a car, ordinary and impossible. The CEO and the co-founder and the kid who'd decided they were worth saving. "Where are we going?" Emily's voice. Curious. Excited. Jennifer looked at Robert. Robert looked at Emily in the mirror. "Library. You said you wanted to go." "Can Jennifer come?" Robert glanced at Jennifer. She was looking at Emily with something soft in her face, something that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. "If she wants to." Jennifer's voice came quiet. "I'd like that." They drove through the city, the afternoon light going gold, then gray, then dark. The library warm and bright when they arrived. Emily led them to the children's section, showed Jennifer her favorite books, the ones about bridges and buildings and things that held weight. Jennifer sat on the floor with her, listened to a 7-year-old explain structural engineering with complete seriousness, asked questions that showed she was actually paying attention. Robert watched from a distance, watched 2 people connect over something simple, over curiosity, over the willingness to learn. An hour passed. Emily had 5 books checked out. They walked back to the car, the night cold now, November settling into winter. Jennifer paused before getting in. "Thank you for letting me come." Emily looked up at her. "You can come next time too, if you want." Jennifer's eyes went bright. She nodded, got in the car. They drove her home, dropped her at her building. She got out, leaned back in before closing the door. "See you Monday." "See you Monday." She closed the door, stood on the sidewalk, watched them drive away. Robert looked at Emily in the mirror. "You like her." "I told you that already." "You were right." Emily smiled. Went back to looking out the window at the city sliding past, at the lights and the people and the ordinary enormous complexity of everything. They drove home, made dinner. Emily showed him her library books. They read together before bed, the comfortable rhythm of a life built from small moments that added up to something solid. That night, after Emily was asleep, Robert sat in the kitchen. Phone dark, laptop closed, just sitting in the quiet. Thought about the past 4 years, about the choice to step back, about watching and waiting, about trusting that truth would surface when it needed to. Thought about Jennifer, about the person she'd been and the person she was becoming, about whether redemption was possible for people who'd done harm without realizing it. He thought the answer was yes, but only if they were willing to do the work, only if they could set aside their certainty long enough to learn what they'd missed. Jennifer was doing that work, slowly, imperfectly, but doing it. His phone buzzed. Message from Jennifer. "Emily's science project, the bridge that holds 17 books. I'd love to see it sometime." Robert looked at the message, at the CEO who was learning to pay attention to 7-year-olds, who was learning that knowing someone's daughter mattered more than knowing their title. He typed back, "She'd like that. Come by tomorrow, dinner at 6, 3 dots. Then, I'll bring dessert." Robert set the phone down, looked at the drawing on the refrigerator. 2 people, 12 windows, a dog, space for what didn't exist yet but could. He stood, turned off the light, went to bed, Tomorrow would come, and the day after that. And eventually January, with its peak volume and its stress tests and its proof of whether they'd fixed what needed fixing. But that was later. That was still not yet. Right now was this. A man who'd been invisible learning to be seen. A woman who'd been certain learning to be humble. A child who'd been wise all along. Right now was enough. The city outside went quiet. November settling into the final days before winter. Inside the small apartment, everything warm and still. Robert closed his eyes. Somewhere in the dark, a future was taking shape, built from small moments. Third bowls and honest questions and drawings that showed what might be. Not yet, wasn't an ending. It was only ever direction. 6 months after the library visit, Robert sat in the conference room on the 41st floor reviewing quarterly reports with Jennifer and Michael. January peak season had come and gone. The corrected modules had held. 0 cascade failures. 0 client losses. The $300 million contract had renewed and expanded. The system worked because they'd understood what it protected before they'd changed it. Jennifer closed her laptop, looked at Robert across the table. The board wants to announce your return officially. Co-CEO, equal authority, press release next week. Robert leaned back, thought about it, about what titles meant versus what work required. No. Jennifer blinked. No? I don't need a title. The equity documents already say what I am. Adding a title doesn't change the work. Michael looked between them, smart enough to stay quiet. Jennifer studied Robert's face. Then, what do you want? I want you to keep asking the right questions. What are we losing? What does this protect? What breaks if we're wrong? I want you to teach the next person those questions so they don't have to learn them the way you did. He stood, gathered his papers. Titles are easy. Wisdom is hard. You're learning the hard part. Don't stop now. He left. Jennifer sat there, looked at the empty chair, at the space where certainty used to sit before humility moved in. Michael waited until the door closed. He's right, you know. Jennifer nodded. She knew. That evening, Jennifer knocked on Robert's apartment door at 6:15. 15 minutes late because traffic had been worse than expected and she hadn't taken the alternate route her GPS suggested because she'd been on a call and hadn't been paying attention. Emily opened the door, looked at her watch. You're late. Not accusing, just observing. Jennifer smiled. Traffic was bad. I should have taken Fifth Avenue. Emily nodded, satisfied with the honest answer, stepped aside to let her in. Robert was in the kitchen, looked up when Jennifer entered. Dinner's ready, you're just in time. Jennifer set a box on the counter, dessert from the bakery Emily liked, chocolate cake with raspberry filling. They ate. Talked about Emily's science fair project. The bridge had held 23 books before collapsing, 3rd place in her grade. She'd lost to a volcano and a solar system model, but she wasn't disappointed because she'd learned that failure points were more interesting than success. After dinner, Emily showed Jennifer her newest drawing. A building with 20 windows this time, 2 adults and a child standing in front, a golden retriever sitting beside them. We're getting a dog next month. Dad promised. Jennifer looked at Robert. He shrugged. I said we'd see. She heard a promise. That's the same thing. Emily's voice carried absolute certainty. Jennifer laughed. Real laugh. Not the controlled professional sound. Something genuine. Later, after Emily went to bed, Jennifer and Robert sat in the living room. Coffee and chipped mugs. The comfortable silence of 2 people who'd learned not to fill every gap with words. Jennifer spoke first. I've been thinking about what happened. The lobby, the system failure, all of it. Robert waited. I thought being smart meant I was right. I thought having the title meant I had the authority. I thought moving fast was the same as moving well. She looked at her coffee. I was wrong about all of it. Robert didn't disagree. Didn't need to. The hardest part wasn't learning I was wrong. It was learning I didn't know I was wrong, that I was so certain of myself I couldn't see what I didn't understand. She looked up. How do you prevent that? How do you stay humble when everyone around you is telling you you're right? Robert thought about it. About 4 years of watching. About tests and patience and Emily's questions. You surround yourself with people who'll tell you the truth. You ask questions that reveal what you don't know. You remember that every system, every person, every situation has invisible protections you can't see until you break them. He set his mug down. And you remember that being powerful doesn't make you right. It just makes you loud. Jennifer absorbed this, filed it next to all the other lessons she'd learned the hard way. Your daughter sees things we don't. She does. The drawing, the third bowl, the way she decided I was worth forgiving before you did. Robert smiled. She sees what's possible without the weight of what's already failed. That's the advantage of being 7. You haven't learned to assume the future looks like the past. Jennifer looked at the drawing on the refrigerator. 20 windows now, 2 adults, 1 child, 1 dog. She's drawing our future. She's drawing a future. Whether it's ours depends on whether we're willing to build it. Jennifer met his eyes. Are you willing to build it? Robert didn't answer immediately. Thought about the question beneath the question. About trust and time and whether redemption was complete or just beginning. I'm willing to see if we can. That's different from certain. But it's enough to start with. Jennifer nodded, set down her mug, stood to leave. At the door she paused. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me when you had every reason to. Robert looked at her, at the woman who'd made him kneel, who'd learned to ask better questions, who'd started showing up for a 7-year-old's science projects. I didn't do it for you. I did it for your father. He asked me to watch over you, to be there when you were ready. And now? Now I'm doing it because you've earned it. Jennifer's eyes went bright. She nodded, left. Robert closed the door, stood there, thought about what it meant to earn something versus deserve something, about the gap between the two, about whether Jennifer had crossed it. He thought she had, mostly. The rest would come with time. His phone buzzed. Text from Richard Davis. Board meeting next Tuesday. They're voting on the co-CEO announcement whether you want it or not. Thought you should know. Robert typed back. Let them vote. I'll do the work either way. Title doesn't change that. 3 dots. Then, you're a difficult man to honor, Robert. Robert smiled. Put the phone away. The next morning, Emily asked him a question over breakfast. Is Jennifer going to be part of our family? Robert looked at his daughter, at the kid who'd asked the complicated questions since she was old enough to talk. What makes you ask that? She comes over a lot now. She brings dessert. She asks about my homework. That's what family does. Robert thought about this, about Emily's definition of family, about actions versus titles. Would you want her to be? Emily considered it. Serious, weighing factors adults would have dismissed as trivial. Yes, but only if she keeps being nice. Not just nice because she has to be. Nice because she wants to be. How will you know the difference? I'll watch, like you taught me. People show you who they are if you pay attention. Robert looked at his 7-year-old daughter, at the wisdom she'd somehow accumulated without anyone teaching it to her explicitly. You're smarter than most adults I know. Emily shrugged, went back to her cereal. That's because adults forget things kids still remember. Like what? Like people can change if they want to. Like mistakes don't have to be forever. Like sometimes the best thing you can do is give someone a 3rd bowl and see what they do with it. Robert sat back, looked at his daughter, at the teacher he'd somehow raised while thinking he was the one doing the teaching. When did you get so wise? Emily smiled into her cereal. I've always been wise. You just started listening. That Tuesday, the board voted. Robert didn't attend, didn't need to. The announcement went out that afternoon. Hailstorm Logistics had 2 co-CEOs, Jennifer Miller and Robert Williams. Equal authority, Equal responsibility. Partnership formalized. Robert's phone exploded with messages. Congratulations. Questions. Interview requests. He ignored most of them, responded to Richard with a single word, noted. Jennifer called. You saw the announcement. Hard to miss. Are you angry? No. Titles don't change work. We've been partners for 6 months. Now there's paperwork that says so. That's all. Silence on the line. I need you to know something. Robert waited. I'm not doing this because the board forced it. I'm not doing it because it looks good. I'm doing it because you've taught me more in 6 months than I learned in 4 years running this company alone. Her voice steady, clear. The voice of someone who'd stopped needing to prove anything. I'm doing it because partnership means both people bring something the other can't. You bring wisdom. I bring execution. Together we're better than either of us alone. Robert thought about Daniel Martinez, about arguments that made both sides stronger, about the company being better for every fight they'd had. Your father would be proud of you. Jennifer's voice cracked slightly. You think so? I know so. He wanted you to learn what you didn't know. You're learning. That's all he ever asked. They hung up. Robert sat in the quiet apartment, thought about cycles, about fathers and daughters, about how the lessons we need most are often the ones that hurt to learn. That evening, Jennifer came over for dinner, brought the chocolate cake Emily loved. They ate, talked, laughed. Emily showed her the updated drawing, 24 windows now. The dog had a name written underneath. Riley. After Emily went to bed, Robert and Jennifer sat in the living room. I've been thinking about lessons. Jennifer's voice quiet in the dim light. What you taught me, what I had to learn, what I want to make sure nobody else has to learn the hard way. And I'm writing it down, creating a manual for the next generation of leaders, not just technical documentation, philosophy, principles, questions to ask before making changes. She looked at him. I want to call it What We Protect. Make it required reading for every manager, every director, every executive. So they understand that systems have invisible safeguards, that optimization without understanding is just expensive guessing, that being right isn't the same as being good. Robert nodded, thought about legacy, about what lasted after the people were gone. Your father and I used to argue about that. He wanted to move fast. I wanted to build things that held. We fought constantly, made each other better every time. He leaned forward. Write it down. But don't make it a manual. Make it a conversation. Show the arguments. Show the disagreements. Show that wisdom comes from tension between different views, not from one person being right. Jennifer pulled out her phone, started making notes. Can I interview you? Get your perspective? Your father's philosophy versus yours? Yes. But interview the engineers too, the ones who made the mistakes, the ones who learned from them. Make it complete, not just the executive view, the whole picture. Jennifer typed faster, ideas flowing, the energy of someone who'd found purpose beyond title. They worked until midnight, outlining, debating, building something together, the way partners should. When Jennifer finally left, Robert stood at the door watching her go, watched her pause on the sidewalk, pull out her phone, type something. His phone buzzed. Message from Jennifer. Thank you for the third bowl, for believing I could learn, for not giving up. Robert typed back. Thank you for proving it was worth it. He closed the door, locked it, turned off the lights. In her room, Emily was already asleep, drawing pad on her nightstand. New sketch started, a building taking shape. More windows this time, more people, more space for what didn't exist yet but could. Robert stood in her doorway, watched her sleep, thought about the future his daughter kept drawing before anyone else could see it. She'd seen Jennifer's redemption before it happened, seen the family before it formed, seen the dog before they bought it, seen possibility where adults only saw failure. That was the lesson, not just for Jennifer, For all of them. That certainty blinds you to what you don't know, that titles don't equal wisdom, that being powerful isn't the same as being right, that the people you overlook might be the ones you need most, that humility isn't weakness, it's the strength to admit you were wrong and the courage to learn from it. That redemption is possible, but it requires work. Real work. The slow, hard kind that changes you from the inside. That forgiveness isn't one moment. It's 1,000 small choices. Third bowls and honest questions and 7-year-olds who see what adults have forgotten. That family isn't just blood. It's who shows up, who stays, who earns their place through action, not assumption. That leadership means asking what you're protecting before you decide it's inefficient. Means understanding what breaks before you change it. Means listening to people regardless of their title. That wisdom comes from tension, from disagreement, from perspectives that challenge your certainty until you're forced to think deeper. That the future isn't fixed. It's drawn by people brave enough to imagine what doesn't exist yet, built by people humble enough to learn what they don't know. Robert closed Emily's door, went to his room, lay down in the dark. Tomorrow Jennifer would start writing, Emily would keep drawing, the company would keep growing, the dog would eventually arrive, and Robert would keep watching, keep teaching, keep showing up for the people who'd earned his presence, because that was the real lesson, the one beneath all the others. That being there matters more than being right, that patience outlasts certainty, that love is built from small moments, not grand gestures, that not yet wasn't an ending. It was only ever direction. And if you were willing to walk it slowly, with humility and questions and open hands, you might arrive somewhere worth being. Somewhere with 24 windows and a dog named Riley, and people who'd learned to see each other clearly. Somewhere called home.